My name is Amy W. Dean, and I was 36 years old when my father decided I was no longer family. I wasn't sitting in a boardroom or across from him at the dinner table when it happened. I was standing in line at a coffee shop, half awake, scrolling through emails I didn't care about, when my phone vibrated. One text, no greeting. No punctuation at the end, just words that felt rehearsed, like they'd been discussed before they ever reached me. We've all agreed. Stay out of the family now. I read it twice. Then a third time, slower, like maybe the meaning would soften if I gave it space. It didn't. A couple people behind me shifted impatiently. Someone sighed. I didn't move. My thumb hovered over the screen longer than it should have. I typed one word. Understood. Then I locked my phone, ordered my coffee, and walked out without waiting for it. Something inside me clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet switch being flipped. Clean, permanent. On the drive home, I didn't turn on music. I listened to my own breathing and replayed the last few weeks in my head. The meetings, the glances, the way conversations seemed to stop when I entered the room. My younger sister, Alyssa, had come back from San Diego last fall, full of energy and opinions she hadn't earned yet. Suddenly, she wanted to modernize things. Suddenly, she wanted a seat at the table. Not after learning the work. Not after building anything. She wanted inheritance without responsibility. Mom called her ambitious. Dad called her refreshing. I'd been called reliable for years. The kind of word people use when they assume you'll keep showing up no matter how you're treated. I grew up being the steady one, the daughter who could be handed a list and trusted to come back with everything checked off. I helped Dad out of a $400,000 hole 3 years earlier when one of his partners vanished with company payroll. He hugged me that day like I'd saved his life. Same man who now told me to stay out of the family. I pulled into my driveway and didn't go inside right away. I sat there and stared at the steering wheel, thinking about Alyssa questioning my role in meetings, asking why I always had final say, suggesting we vote differently. It sounded fair on the surface, democratic, but it was a setup, and they'd walked right into it. What they didn't know was that I still controlled the largest private stake in the new office development, not just financially, structurally. I'd signed off on the core engineering plans. Without my approval, the permits meant nothing. So I made a call. Mark was my advisor, someone who'd never mixed business with family drama. I told him to pull everything, every dollar, every commitment, move it to the Midtown renovation project we'd discussed weeks earlier. Make it fast. He didn't ask questions. Within hours, the wires were in motion. 2 days later, the construction site stalled. Workers were sent home. The bank paused the loan. Permits started expiring. The project my father called his legacy hit a wall. That night, my mother came to my condo. I watched her through the security feed as she stood outside for 10 minutes, perfectly composed, waiting for me to open the door. I didn't. She left without knocking. An hour later, she texted, "I don't know what you're doing, but you're hurting everyone." I didn't respond. The next morning, my older brother Andrew sent a stream of messages that barely formed sentences, then one that stopped me cold. "Alyssa showed us your message. We know what you were planning." I stared at the screen. I had never sent anything like that, and in that moment, I knew exactly what had happened. She'd faked it, a screenshot, a lie dressed up as proof, and they believed her without ever asking me a single question. That afternoon, the lead developer messaged me in a panic. "Your withdrawal just killed our funding." I waited an hour before replying. My father told me to stay out of the family, so I did. No emojis, no punctuation, just facts. I could almost hear the sound of glass breaking somewhere far away. And I hadn't even started yet. After I sent that message, the quiet settled in like dust after a collapse. Not the angry kind of silence with slammed doors and frantic calls. This was cleaner, erasing. The family group chat went dead. No calendar updates, no dinner plans, no bored emails accidentally forwarded to me. I wasn't blocked. I was removed, like I'd never existed in the first place. Fine. Silence gave me time, and time is leverage if you know how to use it. I met with a lawyer 2 days later. Not one my family had ever worked with. Someone outside the orbit, someone who didn't owe my father favors or holiday invites. I laid everything out. The text, the withdrawal, the ownership structure. She listened, took notes, and nodded slowly. Then she told me what I already suspected. Legally, they had nothing. Emotionally, they were standing on a trapdoor they'd already triggered. My investment wasn't optional capital. It was load-bearing. Without it, the financing chain collapsed. The permits expired. The early tenants who'd signed letters of intent would walk. And because the rest of the family had leveraged personal assets to guarantee their portion, they were now exposed in ways they didn't fully understand yet. That weekend, I heard through a mutual contact that my father had flown to Miami. He was chasing private equity, the desperate kind that smiles politely while tightening the noose. Deals like that come with strings long enough to strangle reputations. I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. Instead, I decided to touch the one thing he cared about more than money: his image. The story he told himself and everyone else about who we were as a family business. I called a journalist I knew from college, someone who still owed me a favor. I didn't give him names. I didn't need to. I pitched a question instead. What happens when a family turns on itself in the middle of a $50 million development? He loved it. The article ran days later. Clean, anonymous, surgical. Anyone in our professional circle knew exactly who it was about. The damage was immediate. Investor meetings were canceled. Side ventures froze. Andrew's partners quietly stepped back. Alyssa went dark on social media, which told me more than any message ever could. She lived online. Silence meant fear. Then my mother called again. This time she left a voicemail. My name sounded unfamiliar in her mouth. She said she didn't know what I thought happened, but this wasn't how to fix it. She said family doesn't do this to each other. She said my father was trying to protect what they built. That word stuck with me. Protect. Protect from what? From me. I didn't call her back. Instead, I ran a reverse image search on the screenshot Alyssa claimed to have shown them. It took 5 minutes, a Reddit post from 4 years earlier. Different names, different context, same layout, same spacing. She'd copied it, edited the text, and sold it as truth. I saved everything. Still didn't say a word. I made another quiet move. I met with the anchor tenant who'd been tied to the original project. I showed them plans for Midtown, better amenities, stronger financing, a timeline that didn't depend on family politics. I offered them a discount on the first 5 years. They signed a letter of intent on the spot. I had that letter sent directly to the developer. No explanation, just proof. He'd understand. The project they were trying to build with me. I'd just rebuilt it without them. 3 weeks passed. Still no apology, still no admission. They wanted me out of the family, so I stayed out. And every day after that, they learned exactly how expensive that decision was. By the 3rd week, the project wasn't struggling anymore. It was dead. Not officially, of course. No one likes to say the word out loud when millions are involved. But everyone could see it. The developer stopped returning calls. The bank quietly withdrew. Contractors moved on to other jobs. What had once been my father's crown jewel was now an empty fenced lot with a sun-faded sign flapping in the wind like it was embarrassed to still be standing there. The only thing that had ever kept it alive had been me. Andrew tried to save it. He reached out to old contacts, hinted at restructuring through shell companies, floated the idea of new partnerships. But people talk. Word travels fast when a family business fractures publicly. No one wanted their money anywhere near something that unstable. Alyssa vanished completely. No Instagram posts, no brunch photos, no fake hustle quotes layered over sunsets. For her, that kind of silence was a collapse. Then the accountant called me. Denise had always been careful, quiet, the kind of person who noticed details others missed. She said Alyssa had drained one of the discretionary accounts the month before everything fell apart. The same account used for brand development. It paid for a Mexico trip, networking dinners, flights that didn't go through proper approval. Denise only caught it because another charge got declined. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't have to. Instead, I made another move. There was a narrow property next to my Midtown development. A former laundromat, empty for years because of zoning issues. I bought it anyway, paid above market. A week later, I secured a second permit. With both parcels, I could triple the original design. Bigger, cleaner, mine. The same tower they'd tried to push me out of, rebuilt without them. They noticed. That Friday night, I showed up at a charity gala. I hadn't planned to go, but an invitation came last minute. I knew my parents would be there. My father saw me first. He was standing with 2 city officials, drink in hand, mid-laugh. When he noticed me, the smile disappeared. He didn't wave, didn't come over, just stared. My mother approached later, flawless on the surface, strained underneath. She asked if we could talk. said this wasn't how things were supposed to go. I told her I hadn't made that decision. She repeated the word protect. I asked her why no one had protected me enough to ask if the screenshot was real. She didn't answer. The next morning, the developer messaged me again. You're rebuilding it, aren't you? Midtown. We saw the permits. I didn't reply right away. He followed up. Your mother's devastated. Andrew's talking to lawyers. Alyssa's disappeared. You proved your point. What do you want? I stared at the question longer than I expected. What did I want? I wanted one person to ask me if it was true. One person to hesitate before cutting me out of my own family. That never happened. Later that afternoon, I drove to Alyssa's apartment. The Audi Q5 sat in the driveway. I'd paid for it 6 months earlier. The title was still in my name. I used the spare key, started the engine, and backed out like it belonged to me, because it did. She ran out in slippers, yelling something I didn't care to hear. I didn't stop. An hour later, she texted, Seriously, you're taking the car back. I replied once, You faked a message to get me cut out of my family, so yes, no response, no typing dots, nothing. By Sunday, I heard she'd moved back home, back to the house that apparently didn't have room for me anymore. That's when I knew something was about to break, and it wasn't going to be me. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew something was wrong the moment my phone lit up with 3 missed calls from my mother. She hadn't done that in weeks. I didn't answer. Then a text came through. Please, it's not what we thought. Can you come by? 10 minutes later, Andrew called. That surprised me more than the text. We hadn't spoken directly since everything fell apart. His message was short. She slipped up. Dad heard it himself. That was enough. An hour later, I was standing in the driveway of the house I grew up in. The same house where Sunday dinners used to feel permanent. The same house that had quietly decided I didn't belong anymore. My father opened the door. No lecture, no forced smile, just a nod as he stepped aside and let me in. The living room was tense. My mother sat stiffly on the couch, hands folded too tightly. Alyssa wasn't there. My father didn't sit down. He stood staring at the wall and said it. She admitted she faked the screenshot. He didn't look at me when he said it, like the words weighed too much to carry directly. Apparently they'd been arguing earlier. Alyssa was angry about the car, about control, about how unfair it was that I always had final say on the biggest decisions. She slipped, said something about how I wouldn't have pulled out if they hadn't believed the message she made up. My father froze, asked her to repeat it. Instead of backing down, she panicked, said she had to do it, said she deserved more, said she couldn't live in my shadow anymore. She confessed to everything. My mother cried. My father didn't. He asked me one question. Why didn't you say anything? I shrugged. Would you have believed me? He didn't answer. They apologized, quietly. No dramatics, no excuses. My mother said they wanted to believe Alyssa because it was easier than questioning the version of events she handed them. They convinced themselves I was dangerous because it fit the story they were already telling. I told them I'd moved on. Midtown was happening. Tenants were lining up. I didn't need their approval anymore. Then my father said he wanted me back in the business, said he'd made a mistake, said Alyssa was out, that he wanted me to rejoin leadership and bring Midtown under the family umbrella. I told him I'd think about it. I did, briefly. I agreed under one condition: full control over every financial decision for the next 2 years. No committees, no vetoes, just me. He agreed without hesitation. The business began to heal almost immediately. My name returned to documents. Banks started calling again. Meetings reopened. Alyssa, meanwhile, unraveled. She lost her apartment, lost her influence, moved back into her old bedroom while my parents stopped shielding her. She demanded the beachfront villa my father had once promised her. He revoked the transfer, listed it within 48 hours. She found out by accident when a real estate agent called to confirm a showing. That was when the balance finally shifted. Not in my favor, in reality's. I went back to my parents' house a week later to pick up old files stored in the basement. Things I'd left behind years ago, when we were still building things together instead of tearing them apart. I hadn't planned to stay, but as I came in through the back door, I heard Alyssa's voice upstairs, sharp, defensive. She was yelling that she wasn't folding laundry, that she wasn't a maid. My mother's voice followed, calm but unyielding, telling her maybe it was time she started acting like a daughter again. I didn't announce myself. I didn't need to. The shift had already happened. Alyssa was back under their roof, but she wasn't being protected anymore. She was living inside the consequences she'd built. The villa was gone. My father had reversed the transfer and listed it without telling her. She found out when a real estate agent accidentally called her number instead of his. The car was still in my garage. Her friends stopped showing up. Her brand partners went quiet. One unfollowed her publicly. That one stung the most. At dinner that night, my father asked her to help clean up. She stared at him like he'd insulted her. My mother handed her a dish towel and told her she didn't get to check out anymore. Alyssa washed dishes in silence. I didn't laugh. I didn't need to. The next day she cornered me in the hallway, said she wasn't my enemy. I told her she'd acted like one. She said she made a mistake. I told her she made a move. She didn't argue. She just stood there, tired, stripped of performance. She asked to come back to the business. I told her there was an opening in the internship program. Entry level, admin support, $17 an hour. Her face fell. She walked away. 2 days later, she applied through HR, not through me. She started the following week. No special treatment. Reporting to a manager she'd once mocked in front of a full room. To her credit, she didn't complain. Not when she was corrected. Not when her work was sent back. She tried. Trying didn't erase what she'd done, but it mattered. The real moment came during a monthly strategy meeting. Halfway through, Alyssa knocked and stepped inside holding a clipboard. She asked if she could say something. I nodded. She told the room the truth, that she'd lied, that she'd fabricated the message because she thought the only way to matter was to take something from me. She didn't cry. She didn't blame anyone else. She owned it. Then she left. A week later, I stopped by her desk, told her she was doing better, tossed her the car key, not a gift, a loan, 10% of her salary until it was paid off. She accepted without arguing. That was when I knew the lesson had landed. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting someone prove they can be different. And Alyssa finally was. The office didn't feel the same after Alyssa spoke in that meeting. Nothing dramatic changed. No applause, no speeches, but something subtle shifted in the air, like everyone had finally stopped holding their breath. People moved differently around her after that. Not kinder, not crueler, just honest. She wasn't the founder's daughter anymore. She was the intern who had burned the house down and stayed to help rebuild it. That kind of reputation doesn't fade quickly. It shouldn't. I kept my distance on purpose, not out of punishment, but clarity. I needed her to succeed or fail without my shadow hovering over her work. Her supervisor sent weekly reports, short, factual, no commentary. Alyssa showed up early, stayed late, redid work without complaint, took notes like someone who finally understood how little they knew. That mattered more to me than apologies. At home, my parents were quieter too. Not guilty exactly, just aware. My mother stopped trying to smooth things over. My father stopped pretending authority came from age alone. We had dinner together again sometimes, not weekly, not forced, just when it felt real. We didn't rehash what happened. We didn't need to. Every interaction carried the memory anyway. One evening, my boyfriend asked if it was over. He'd watched the whole thing from the outside, steady when I wasn't. I told him it depended on what he meant by over. The damage was done. The rebuilding had started. But families don't reset. They recalibrate. Some cracks stay visible no matter how carefully you repair them. And maybe that's the point. A month later, Alyssa missed a deadline. Nothing catastrophic. A minor internal report, late by a few hours. She came to my office on her own. No excuses. Just explained what went wrong and how she'd fix it next time. I nodded. That was it. When she left, I realized something uncomfortable. I trusted her effort now, not her judgment, not yet. But effort is where trust starts when everything else is gone. The Midtown project broke ground that same week. New signage, new investors, my name on the documents where it belonged. I stood at the site one morning before anyone else arrived and watched the sun hit the steel framing. It felt quieter than I expected. Victory usually does. It doesn't shout. It just stands there, undeniable. I didn't win by destroying my family. I won by refusing to disappear when they tried to erase me. Alyssa lost everything that mattered to her before she understood what mattered at all. My parents learned that protection without truth is just another kind of betrayal. And I learned something too. Power doesn't come from being indispensable. It comes from knowing when to walk away and when to let someone earn their way back. Some lessons burn fast, others linger. This one stayed, and it changed all of us.